Hello, my name is Vicki Molta, and this is You and Your Mental Wellness. We're a monthly talk show. We talk about people who are in recovery from mental health issues and substance use issues. And tonight I have a guest, Don Fisher, who's a recovery programs coordinator at NAMI, Connecticut in Hartford. And so I just want to welcome you, for coming on the
No.
show.
Well, thank you for hosting these, and I know you've been doing these for several years,
Right.
and this is a vital service.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, I've been doing it for about 4 or 5 years now, and I learn something with each person that comes on the show, and I hope the audience learns things too. I'm sure
Yeah.
they do. But I'm gonna do something a little different tonight. But first, I want to just ask you how working has helped you in your recovery.
Well, I would say that one of the things what I call recovery, and we'll get more into that, I call it redevelopment, is that it falls into the rubric of what I call constructive activity. And it takes this illness that I've had or this condition and uses it as a resource.
Mm-hmm.
Also, I'm not asked to do more than I can handle. So it does, for me, it relies upon the experiences that I've had, the limitations and capacities that I do have, and it also treats me as a person and respectfully.
Right. So, would you say this is like the first job that you've had where you really felt like it was a good match and a good fit? Or would you say that there were other jobs in your past where it didn't quite fit like this one does? Because you've been doing this for a while. How long have you been working at NAMI now?
Well, since 2007.
Oh, yeah, that's great.
Before I had volunteered with NAMI for about 7 years.
Mm-hmm.
And from 2002 to the time when I came on board with NAMI in 2007, I worked as a coordinator for peer mentoring at the Kennedy Center in Trumbull.
Mm-hmm.
And that was a reasonably good fit. But this one is a better fit.
That's great. That's
Yeah,
great.
and I'm very, very grateful for that.
That's good because a lot of people are never able to really find the right fit for what they're doing. And I know you do a great job too because I've seen you and I've done presentations with you, and you're very well respected by the people that work for you. And I just wanted to say that. So, but before we get on a little bit more about you, I just want to say that I'm reading a book right now. It's 5 years old. It's called Anatomy of an Epidemic, written by Robert Whitaker. And some of you probably know who Robert Whitaker is. He's the author of a book called Mad in America. And I never read that book. I want to read the book. But he's really anti-psychiatric medications. He thinks that people with mental health issues get sicker when they take psychiatric medications. And I've been reading the book, and it's very controversial, and it makes me feel very angry in a way because it generalizes and it sees things in black and white and just says that I get the feeling that he's saying people with mental health issues use medications as a crutch, and they're just not strong enough or well enough to go off it on their own. And I just want to say tonight that I don't agree with that because there's not a one-size-fits-all. For some people, going off medication is the best thing they could have ever have done. But for other people, it helps them along with their recovery. And I just wanted to talk to you about it a little bit, Don, too, your opinion about that, because the more I get into this book, the angrier I feel. And like I said before, I'm not anti going off medications, but there needs to be, there's two sides to every story, and everybody's unique. Wouldn't you say that?
Yeah. Well, I would also like to say something about what the late Molly Ivins said, that there are about 17 sides to the truth.
Mm-hmm.
And there could be more here or even less. If somebody does well without medication, okay, I know I certainly need it so that there's a floor for my mood. Sometimes people need to go back on medication, other times medication doesn't work and they have to try something else. And it's very highly individual, and those for me are two key terms, highly individual. And the one thing that this book and maybe this author may bring out is it begins to widen the debate, widen the discussion. Anti-medication on one extreme, nothing but medication on the other, and then gradations in between,
Right.
so that it's just not one-sided toward one or the other.
Right. I think that's a really good way of putting it, because people can be very influenced by what they're reading, and I think it's really important to look at both sides of the story before you make a decision to do something. And I do know that there are a lot of people that I've met, especially in the past couple of years, who have gone off their medications, and they say it's hard, and but they got on the other side and they're doing well, and that's them, you know. But when there's pressure to say, well, you're a loser or a failure if you don't take your medication, to me that seems radical.
Well, it also seems to me to be rather judgmental, and then also putting people down
Right.
who
Right.
don't conform to that view. It's very much biased, and it's kind of a them versus us
Right.
sort of thing. And I say, well, no, life is full of nuances.
Mm-hmm.
It's not black or white. It's not gray or purple. It's not one thing or another. It's shades of gray.
Right. Right. So that I just wanted to bring that up. I have a lot of questions to ask you, and we don't have a lot of time, but I did want to ask you, you said your primary job is self-redevelopment and reconstruction. That's your definition of recovery for you. So if you could just tell me a little bit more about that.
Well, yes. What that means for me is I probably was never really well, never whole. And the term recovery means that I want to get back to being well and balanced. And I probably was not. So the prefix "re" means I want to get back, and that's about I have nothing to go back to. So what I want to do is pioneer a new trail, and more of an art or design or construction term works for me. It resonates well with me at an emotional level. So that's why I use the terms redevelopment, reconstruction.
So you want to
foundation,
build
yes.
build a person, a new person.
Yeah, in a certain way, or add on.
Mm-hmm.
Basically, there are some traits, some character traits that can't be changed, but others that can.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why I use those terms. And another one is I look forward to the future and also to live in the present, but also to be aware of the past.
Right, right. That's important, because I heard that the best predictor of future behavior is past behavior, and so I think that it's important to look back on the past and see, well, I took a path and that didn't work out, so I don't have to go down that path
Right.
again, you know. So, oh, what were you going to say?
Well, no, I didn't have, I was going to say something that says, well, if you come to a fork in the road, take it,
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Now,
so to speak. Yeah.
limitations. Now, you said that you have a sense of peace about your limitations. That's what you told me. Limitation. What would you say some of your limitations are? Because I know that in your reconstruction, there's some things that you've learned about yourself that are, you have your strengths and your weaknesses, and I just wanted to know if was it. Let me ask you this instead. Was it hard to accept originally at first that you had limitations and you couldn't do certain things, or?
Well, I would say what comes to mind is when I first got out of the hospital. Fortunately, I've only had one hospitalization, and I thought that my life was over. In a certain way, I did accept and understand that I had an illness, but I also didn't at that time accept that I had the limitation because it felt like I was lesser than everybody else. Now, fast forward so many years, I say, well, look, for example, I need time to sit down and just daydream or to go into a trance and to imagine things, or just to, as artists do, stew in their juices, so to speak. And I very much need that. And that's a limitation because I need that time alone that would otherwise go towards being out and about, say among people, or just working 9 to 5. Because I do my job for NAMI part-time.
Mm-hmm.
And the other part of the time I've got to do this and I've got to do other things. So I'm limited in that way.
So it's about knowing yourself and what your limitations are.
Knowing myself and my limitations, and also my character traits, and then how to work with those.
And that's part of the reconstruction. And the,
Yes.
and so would you say that you're, because you said that you need a lot of alone time, so would you say that you're an introvert or introspective?
Well, yeah, I derive introvert, which means deriving my energy from processing. I take a lot of time processing, and it's very beneficial because then I come up with solutions or ideas.
Mm-hmm.
And I get that aha moment, and sometimes I get that twice a day.
Wow, great.
And it's very, very important, and to work with that, roll with that flow. And it's helped me out in doing my work for NAMI and in other ways.
Mm-hmm. Well, would you say that in this country, we're a country of extroverts, and and the introverts live in an extroverted world, or?
Well, it would seem that the culture that we have is go, 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 go for the gold, you can do anything. And actually I say, well, wait a minute, some of us are not built like that. And maybe a lot of us try to fit into that. And part of the messages that I had in my life is that I had to force fit myself. And I said, no, I'm not like that. And so I understand that, yes, I live in a culture that's go, 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 and be impatient, want it now, or seems to have that message. And I said, well, no, I live differently, and that's okay.
Mm-hmm. So would you say that recovery is an inside job, pretty much, that you've got to really, this is all about knowing yourself? And
well, it's also knowing myself, knowing the culture that I live in, knowing where I stand historically.
mm-hmm.
For example, 100 years ago, I would have been, even 50 or even 40 years ago, I would have been put in a hospital for a very long time. Also, we would not have the respect for the experience of illness and recovery or reconstruction as we do now, where it's beginning to be recognized.
Mm-hmm.
And to put that all together, and then also to recognize that I'm a human being first, and that an illness or a condition is not the whole piece.
Right, right. Well, so I have questions about your past, which I'm not sure I really want to cover too much, but for your recovery, was it a long process for you to get to the point where you are now? And What helped you and what got in the way?
Well, it's been a long process. I went into the hospital in July of '94, and I was there for 10 days in the hospital and then outpatient for several months. And it's been a long road. And to understand what were some pivotal points, it's kind of hard because there were hundreds or maybe even thousands of little steps along the way. And there have been some regressions, but it's mostly been something where I've had often the atmosphere or the people that have helped me out, and also the sense of dedication and determination to be able to see this through.
Right, right. Well, so the things, when you began experiencing mental health challenges, did you have any awareness at the time that that you needed help right away? Were you able to get help right away when you, or you said that you've always felt that there was no starting point with the.
No, I think there wasn't any starting point. I think I just accumulated over the years, starting from childhood.
And then you accepted it when the time came in 1994. You felt that you needed extra help to.
Well, at that time, I was feeling suicidal. And I could have gone one way or the other. And somehow, something kicked in, that will to survive. And I don't know how long I was teetering. But instead of driving myself, say, to a bridge and then jumping off, I drove myself to the hospital. And I think some of the rough experiences that I've had from my early years on probably in a certain way helped me to develop that kernel of strength, that kernel of courage and that will just to seek help. And to give an example I'll give you two examples. When I was 10 years old, I do recall leaning against a car on the street that I lived on. And I remember saying to myself, if I want things done right, I have to do them myself. And what that is, that's a statement of two things: of responsibility, and two, I can't rely on family, I can't rely on school, I can't rely on the neighborhood. Because that's a statement of saying, well, wait a minute, my support systems or my community was not helpful. So I
That
tried
must have
to
been
take it
hard.
on myself. It was. And then later on, it was something where I absorbed that and said, well, no, I'm responsible for everything. And I put that on myself, both in ways that I did and did not understand. So it was kind of overblown, and for me to ask for help was almost unknown. But that cry for help
Right.
at that time was probably one of the lowest points of my life. But then that strength, that kernel of strength that I had built up from those early years kind of kicked in.
But and so when you asked for help, it was kind of like taking a step off a bridge for you, because you weren't used to asking for help. And then once you did get help, do you see it differently now, that getting help can be a sign of strength from therapists or doctors or
Yeah.
friends or?
Well, I have a little saying in my head. It says it takes strength to admit to a weakness.
That's true. I believe that.
Because I think what I was doing is by not asking for help, I was saying, well, no, I'm okay, I'm functional, I'm responsible. I was trying to preserve my self-respect. And then I had to slowly come to terms and say, no, I need help. And now I've gotten to the point saying, if I need help, I'll ask for it.
That's great that you've come a long way. Some people in this country, it seems like people don't like to do that, ask for help, and I think
Mhm.
it's, I think it is a sign of strength to ask for help and to acknowledge that you don't have all the answers and that you're not perfect, that you're not a machine, that you're a human being, and so I think that sounds like it was kind of a turning point for you.
Yes. Well, I've also heard the term living independently, but I thought, well, wait a minute. We're individual. Again, in this culture, there's a focus on the individual, but we're not so much independent as interdependent.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And that's also another way of changing my thinking to understand that, yes, I need that time alone. I tend to be more, quote, independent, but I'm also dependent upon other people and vice versa.
Right. I believe that too. Uh, so I wanted to ask you about stigma. Would you say that it's still widely prevalent today in this society, and what can be done to change the public's perceptions of mental illness? And I know that in your job, that's what you do.
Well, I think that in my job, I manage presentations where people who are living well with mental illnesses or mental health conditions do talk about their experiences to patients, to college and university groups, to police, and to family members and others. And then I also coordinate some support groups. The biases and the misconceptions and the fears that people may have of those of us who have mental health conditions is still rampant. It's probably less in some degrees, let's say for bipolar disorder and depression, but I think maybe for other poorly understood conditions like schizophrenia and schizoaffective disorder, from what I've seen, are not as well understood.
Right.
And I did hear one time kind of like a little ditty that made fun of people with mental health conditions, and I did alert NAMI to it.
Mm-hmm.
Or that I've been very fortunate not to get get put down that much
Right.
for having this condition. I
Did-
feel very fortunate, but still, I've come across other people who have had a lot of difficulty with other people.
Right. Have you had, but you've had your share of that too, stigmatizing and people not wanting to get to know you better or
Well,
support
not really.
you,
I've
or-
just been very fortunate, but I have had some situations where somebody said to me, "Well, if you want my help, you answer to me."
Oh,
Kind of like being over controlling.
right.
Or another person saying, "Did you take your medication like the doctor told you to?" Very looking down on me as an
Condescending.
aberrant child, willfully just flouting the rules or needing to be micromanaged.
Right. Right.
Or then I've heard somebody referring to me, do they, meaning people like me, when they were talking to somebody else. This is, do they need da 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 da? And I picked up on that.
So that's very disrespectful. I've encountered that too, where some people don't respect and it's lack of dignity too, that we have dignity and if we're not treated with respect, that's stigmatizing and bullying too.
Very,
in a-
very
in
good
a
that you
way.
brought up bullying, because it is bullying, even whether it's direct or indirect.
Mm-hmm.
Also, some people may not be able to somehow extend themselves to empathize
Right.
with somebody.
Right.
And it kind of reminds me of what you've seen from Mr. Whitaker here, is that he's putting down. And it's kind of that kind of like them.
Right. Right.
sort of mentality.
Right. Now, we only have a couple of minutes left, but I just want to quote something that you told me, and I really liked what you said. You said, I live in a situation where I'm permitted to be myself and not put on a show. I live according to my character traits. I'm living life versus a lifestyle. So would you like to add anything else to that, or?
Well, when I say life, not a lifestyle, life is much is substance. And I said I can be myself. I don't have to hide. And lifestyle is more of a persona, a false front, or having to hide. Like I did have a job one time where I had to hide my illness or my condition. I prefer the term condition now. And I don't have to, fake it to make it, so to speak. So I can just, I feel that I'm very, very fortunate that I can live in a way that does make sense to me, does help me live a balanced life to the extent that I can create it and keep it going.
So it must be very freeing to be able to be accepted for who you are.
Oh, it's a liberation.
Mm.
It's one of those definitions of freedom.
Mm-hmm.
We often talk about we want freedom. I say, well, what does that mean?
Mm-hmm.
And this is what it means for me.
That's great. Well, it was really great talking to you,
Well,
and
thank you very much.
Had such a really very deep, meaningful conversation, and I want to thank you very much for being on the show, and I hope maybe you can be on the show again in the future. I want to thank Jeff Hansen for doing the production. He's always shows up. He does a great job, and I want to thank him. And I want to thank Abigail White. She runs the studio, and she's very helpful. And I just want to thank the audience for tuning in. And so I'll just see you next month, excuse me. So have a good month. Have a good spring. Thank you.